What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
America, welcome to our show today. It is Monday, May 8th, 2017, and getting into the start of a new week. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Right now, we're seeing these hearings before the Senate committee. Sally Yates, who was Attorney General for 10 days, is testifying about her meetings at the White House and the Russian influence. They're still pushing it. They're using these hearings to push Russian influence on the election, even though no evidence has been found. Even Nancy Pelosi came on out and said, no, they didn't find any evidence. We just assume it was true because Russia obviously would have wanted Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton. And that's it. It's guilt by accusation. And they're still out there pushing this thing as hard as they absolutely can. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Susan Rice had originally refused a request to testify at the Senate hearing. Now she's agreed to it, but on one condition, and that is she will testify before the Senate committee if it's conducted in a classified, closed-door setting. In other words, she does not want the press or you, the people, to know what she's going to tell the senators. And then, of course, she'll come on out and say, well, you know, we're talking about the evidence that Russia interfered with the U.S. election. And every time it's brought up, all Clapper says is, well, there are things I can't talk about here. There are things I can't talk about. You're just going to have to trust us. We have evidence the Russians are really, 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 really bad people. Now, Rand Paul is once again asserting that Obama spied on him during the campaign season using these NSA intercepts. Apparently, he sent a written request to Donald Trump for an investigation and hearings a month ago. Absolutely nothing is happening on that one. It's all about demonizing Russia, not actually getting to the facts. Facts, who cares about facts? We live in a post-truth society. Now then, as you probably are already aware, Macron won the election yesterday. He's the new president of France. He defeated Le Pen by a huge, huge margin, far more than the polls suggested. And we're already hearing reports not just about ballots that were left blank by protesting voters, but spoiled ballots, ballots that were too damaged to use. And those were in such numbers, it could have impacted the election because they had more of these spoiled ballots than votes for Marine Le Pen. Now, Macron is already out there showing his European Union affiliation, servitude, was out there in his acceptance speech, I'll defend Europe, and apparently he waited until after the French national anthem had played and waited until they were playing the European Union anthem before he walked out to give his speech. He's just telegraphing that the European Union won that election last night, and already people are asking, was this election stolen, given so many that we have seen exposed as fraudulent in recent years here? Investment Watch blog, was the French election stolen, or do they just love being cucks? And another story here, we've just witnessed what can happen when the globalists work together, and saying it was a concerted effort of the world's globalist leaders to further their agenda at the expense of the voting public. Now come on out that Obama was over there campaigning for Macron. That's interfering with a foreign election, isn't it? They're trying to make a really big deal over the allegation Russia interfered with our election, but the U.S. is out interfering in elections in other countries, at least 81 that we know of. And there seems to be this attitude about, well, it's okay for the United States to interfere with other elections. We're the good guys, but by golly, they better not interfere with ours. And apparently a lot of information was released about Macron over and above the raised eyebrows about his strange marriage to his high school teacher. And there were documents about possible tax evasion in the Caribbean islands. And, of course, immediately said, oh, the Russians are hacking us. The Russians are hacking us because they want Le Pen. Macron Gate is the biggest story in the world, certainly in the hours before the election. Twitter was caught actively censoring it. Anything about Macron Gate was being taken down. And the French police are targeting the citizen journalist who uploaded the evidence that Macron is using offshore accounts for tax evasion. So here we are. Government exists to protect itself and to protect the criminals. When there's a lot of overlap there. The laws are only being deployed against those of us who would be interested in getting the truth out. When you live with a government of liars, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. So Stefan Molyneux is out there saying, so Obama spied on Le Pen and endorsed Macron. If this is him not interfering in a foreign election, what would interference really look like? And he's absolutely right. We're seeing this huge, huge double standard. Well, let's get on over to North Korea and the booga booga that is happening over there. And the latest attempt to convince you North Korea is an enemy that must be destroyed immediately is the threat of an imp attack aimed at the U.S. home front. And apparently a congressional expert who is unnamed in the original article is accusing North Korea of having hidden nuclear weapons in its 2 Earth-orbiting satellites that it put up as part of its civilian space program. And they're going back to a system called FOBS, Fractional Orbital Bombardment System, which this article claims was invented by the Russians, but no, it was actually invented by the United States. And it's based on a very simple theory. Satellites that are being launched into orbit follow a different trajectory off the ground than a ballistic attack missile. Ballistic missiles, in order to maximize range, go up at 45-degree angles. Satellites tend to launch vertically to get out of the atmosphere before they pitch on over and go for speed without the air resistance. And so the theory behind FOBS is that you would have a warhead disguised as a satellite and you'd launch it as a satellite and it would be in orbit, and then when it was over the target, it would deorbit and strike, or it would detonate above the atmosphere for an M. And that's what they're now claiming North Korea is already in the position of being able to do because of their 2 Earth-orbiting satellites. So that's your daily dose of booga booga. And maybe they're considering doing an imp attack on the U.S. as a false flag to get you all hot and bothered for the coming attack here. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. And this is a good point for us to mention that we are in the middle of the Republic Broadcasting Network's May fundraising drive, and I am being told that this is really very, very serious. We've already seen other independent media broadcasters be driven from existence by economic warfare, going after the advertisers, trying to find ways to harass them, lawfare. They're going after Alex Jones. They've gone after my advertisers. It really is a war out here, and RBN needs your help, or they're just not going to be around, is what I'm being told. So there are 3 ways that you can, and by the way, I hate asking for money. You know that about me, but it's really, really desperate. So, take down this phone number, 800-724-2719. That's 800-724-2719, and you can call in and arrange for a donation that way. There is also a PayPal link on republicbroadcastingnetwork.org's webpage, and there is also a postal address where you can send a check or cash donation. And nobody out here is living the life of luxury. We're really on the edge at RBN, just as we are at whatreallyhappened.com. And the only way we're going to be able to push back the big money oligarchical control of our country is the little money has to unite together in service to restoration of our republic. And these are desperate times for all involved. It's just high stress, and nobody is in this business with the illusion they're going to get rich. The big money goes to the paid liars on the corporate media. And so RBN needs your help, and I know you've already been helping me, but hopefully you can do just a little bit more. Every little bit is appreciated and needed over at RBN. All righty, getting on back to the military. As you're aware, the U.S. Air Force has been playing with this robotic space plane. It looks like a mini space shuttle. It's got the black and white tile, and it seems to have these extremely long duration missions. The very first one spent 224 days in space. The next one was 468 days. The one after that, 675. The latest mission of the X-37B plane lasted 718 days, and nobody has any idea what it was doing up there on any of these missions. So people are just kind of wondering what's going on here. Now, over in North Korea, their election is tomorrow. And the polls are showing that a former anti-government student leader, Moon Jae-in, is likely to succeed the ousted President Park Geun-hye. And that's going to pose a problem for the United States, because Moon Jae-in is very much in favor of oppositions the U.S. has to this, is that Russia has declared this deal bars American jets from most of Syria's skies, saying you will not fly over these safe zones. That is what makes them safe zones. The State Department spokesman is saying, absolutely not. We have a right to fly anywhere we want in the world and bomb terrorists. And nobody can stop us. So that is the sticking point. Meanwhile, over at the United Nations, the UN Secretary General is saying, look, this is a good idea. This is a good deal. Let's have these little zones and de-escalate the conflict, which means we can expect that bigger, grander false flag, more professionally produced, to be hitting the air any time now, followed by a U.S. invasion. Because we're hearing all those signs. Now, Turkey is turning out to be the wild card. Turkey is saying it may infiltrate into Iraq and Syria. And he's saying it's an operation to flush militants out of the area in Turkey's south, meaning the Kurds. He does not want the Kurds there. He certainly does not want a Kurdistan, which is diametrically opposed to the U.S. policy in the region. Meanwhile, we're getting another report that Turkey has already deployed troops into Idlib, Syria. So that is certainly going to complicate things. Story coming out of Sputnik News, Washington may be pushing Syrian Kurds' plan to extend territory. The Syrian Kurds are now saying they want 1/3 of Syria. Obviously, Syria's government does not approve of that. The Syrian people living on those lands certainly don't want to be kicked off. But the formation of an independent Kurdistan to reduce the size of Iran, Turkey, and Syria has been on the U.S. agenda for quite a long time. And the Kurds are counting on this U.S. support for a Kurdistan, and they're including another demand, which is access to the Mediterranean. Okay, I'm being told that I need to step back and repeat some comments about Korea, because that was a lot of the show. Yes, oh, no, I didn't. Here we go. All kinds of problems. BAM user didn't start when it was supposed to. Okay, all right. Let's go back. Alrighty. Well, it was more than 30 seconds ago, but let me back up and talk about what's going on in Korea. Korean elections are tomorrow, and Moon Jae-in is well ahead in the polls to be the new president of South Korea. That's going to be problematic for the United States government, because Moon Jae-in is in favor of reconciliation with North Korea. He's already announced that if he wins the election tomorrow, he is going to tell the United States to get out of South Korea. South Korea is going to take care of their own defenses, and they're going to do it by making friends with North Korea. So that we could see another major stolen election like we just saw in France and saw almost happen in the U.S. last year. Now, getting on back to Syria, Russia, Iran, and Turkey have put together this safe zone concept, which the UN Secretary General approves of, but the U.S. is opposing, because part of the deal is the United States is not allowed to fly over the Syrian safe zones, and the U.S. is taking a position that the U.S. has the right to go anywhere in the world and drop bombs. So, stepping on out here, Kurds want 1/3 of Syria with U.S. support. And they're claiming that they have a legal right under international law to access to the Mediterranean. And I don't believe that they do. There are a lot of landlocked countries, like Austria, for example, that aren't out there demanding other countries give them a path through to the nearest beach. So this is bordering on the edge of unrealistic. Meanwhile, this is very troubling. We are seeing an escalating war of words between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And apparently the Saudis came on out. Their Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said that any contest for influence in the region between the Sunni Muslim kingdom and the revolutionary Shiite theocracy will take place inside Iran, not inside Saudi Arabia. And Iran has now responded that Iran, if it is attacked, will hit back at most of Saudi Arabia, with the exception of Islam's holy sites at Mecca and Medina. So there's an escalating war of words, and what it seems like to me is the United States used Saudi Arabia as their military proxy for an invasion of Yemen, and now it looks like the United States is going to use Saudi Arabia as a proxy to start the long-sought-for war with Iran. Meanwhile, down in Yemen, more children are being killed. There was an article that came out of Reuters focusing on the death of Jamila, aged 7. And, of course, they're trying to say, these people in Yemen, why did they persist in fighting against the outside invaders? Look how they're suffering. Well, it's the outside invaders that are the cause of the problem. Meanwhile, over in Israel, Israel is escalating the number of Palestinian home demolitions in East Jerusalem, which under the original UN partition plan is supposed to be Palestinian territory. And at the current pace, they're set to overtake last year's record high of demolitions. Apparently, they've bulldozed over 66 homes during the first 4 months of this year. They're just out there taking it. Another young Palestinian, 16-year-old girl, Fatima Afif Abd al-Rahman Haji, in East Jerusalem, was executed in cold blood by the Israeli police and border guards. Now, of course, they're saying she attacked them with a knife, but witnesses have come on forward, and apparently there's a photo to back it up, that she was non-threatening. She was more than 10 meters away from the group of soldiers when they just opened fire on her. Now, Israel is apparently... Oh, no, we're going to take a break here. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show today. And we're dealing with some technical issues, and I apologize to the BAM user people that feed was late in starting as well. Too many buttons and switches around here. Okay, getting on back to the story I was starting on when we hit the commercial break. Israel's intelligence minister, Israel Katz, is now demanding Donald Trump recognize that the Golan Heights are an indivisible part of Israel. And this is going to be a little awkward for the U.S. government, because remember when Crimea broke away from Ukraine, and everybody was talking about their right to do so under the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the argument coming back from the U.S. government is, we must work to preserve the sanctity of national borders. And now all of a sudden you have Israel asking Trump to redraw Israel's border around the Golan Heights, which are now known to have a huge oil and gas reserve underneath it. So we'll see what Trump does, but given all the other recent disappointments, who knows? We're going to take a phone call now. Jeff in St. Paul. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey. Okay. We've talked about the 4 countries that still remain without the privately owned central banks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What countries other than those don't even have a working government? Like Somalia?
Yeah.
Okay, so in other words, they're not in any shape to actually have an organized central bank.
Well, no.
The
private central bank operates independent of the government. The Federal Reserve likes to create the illusion they're part of the U.S. government. That's why they have the name Federal rather than the Third Bank of the United States. But it's no more federal than Federal Express. It's just a name. And yes, there are some entanglements in terms of the U.S. government being able to have a say on who the chairman is, but the U.S. government is unable to audit the Federal Reserve. And we even have let me finish this one thought here. Let me finish this one thought. We have Alan Greenspan on a video admitting the Federal Reserve Bank answers to no federal government authority. They are a power unto themselves. So you're talking.
Okay, so the country of Somalia. Okay, like we have a big population now of Somalians in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Minnesota, and my contention is that they're just, flooded with everything they want or need, and we're doing that so they send money back to their family in Somalia, which draws and hopefully keeps them in the United States orbit if things ever get settled down there.
Well, my understanding is the U.S. is already starting to militarily intervene in Somalia.
But isn't that a way to kind of, put breadcrumbs so that they all look to the United States, that even though China and Russia are closer, and they're starting their one belt, one road system. But Somalia is on the coast of two oceans. It's the entrance into the heart of Africa, and it's all full of oil.
Well, let me point out, have you seen much gratitude coming from all the refugees who are getting free stuff in Europe and the United States of America? The attitude tends to be that
they think they're entitled.
Yeah, they think they're entitled. There's very little gratitude going on there. And I don't think the United States realistically thinks they're going to sway the political future of Somalia based on all the free goodies given to Somali migrants who are in the United States and in Europe.
Mm-hmm. And and I think that maybe because of the debt that some of these big oil countries that hold our debt are telling our country to, open the floodgates, and there's no money for roads or bridges or anything here, but they're just building huge apartment blocks everywhere, but they're not for Americans. They're having separate, little enclaves now.
Well, I don't think the oil companies are behind that, because the oil companies are going to use the indigenous Somalis as oil field workers, because they're going to work.
The oil seek them. The oil seek them.
Oh, okay, all right. I see what you're saying.
Like what happened when we first had the big immigration with Egyptians and Arabs and stuff. These guys started out driving taxis, and then they started buying up all the grocery stores.
Okay, well, it's a good point, but I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials. Thank you very much for the call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we get back to the phones here, Erdogan has issued a statement urging Muslims to make a point of visiting Al-Aqsa to protect the mosque's Islamic identity, because we're seeing Israel attempt to turn all of Jerusalem into a totally Jewish area. There's been talk about the Al-Aqsa Mosque has to come down to make way for the third temple of Israel, and all of this is just horrendously provocative to all these world's religions. One of my favorite movies, directed by Ridley Scott, Kingdom of Heaven, and at the very end when Balian and Salahuddin are facing off, and Balian is saying, if you try and capture the city, we'll burn it all down. Every rock, every stone, everything that drives men mad, we will destroy. And Salahuddin says, I wonder if it might not be better if you did. Because if you look at how much war and bloodshed is focused on just that little tiny piece of ground here. Now, the reason Erdogan is doing this is because Israel is actually considering legislation to legally declare Israel a Jewish-only state. After all this time about screaming about not being apartheid, they're going ahead, and it's actually being debated, where Jewish people will be citizens and everybody else will be second class. And it is basically a declaration of apartheid, although if you use that word, you're a filthy, dirty anti-Semite who wants Hitler to come back and gas Jewish babies in the ovens. Okay, we're going to take another phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Well, you can classify me as a filthy, dirty anti-Semite.
Okay.
Because,
let me get my rubber stamp.
They're trying to take the goal on for the oil, and they have been an apartheid state forever, and where they haven't officially by law declared themselves a Jewish state, they refer to themselves everywhere around the world as just that, and there always has been everybody else has always been a second-class citizen, so that's the first thing, but. The other thing is, I really thought Obama was one of the worst presidents we've ever had. Mm-hmm. There's only a very few things that I agreed with him on. One of them was his agreement that he forged with Iran on the nuclear deal.
Yes.
And now we are so thoroughly undermined and subverted and controlled by the Jewish lobby. That they are investigating. Now you have to, it's like they did with Russia, where you can't treat with Russia anymore for fear you'll be, McCarthyited and called a traitor, basically.
Yes.
And now it's the same thing. If you agreed with Iran, with the Iran deal, they want to investigate Obama over forging that diplomatic deal with Iran. So if you disagree with Israel, you're going to be investigated, and God forbid you come out the wrong way. But they're actually doing that.
Yeah, I know.
And it just drives me nuts.
Okay. Well, please don't use the word forging regard to the deal of Iran, because there's a negative connotation of faking. But certainly Obama crafted the P5+1 deal.
Yes.
That's a better word to use. It's not, we're not going to confuse people that way. But yes, now that he's no longer the president, the fact that he stood behind that deal, they're trying to open an investigation into it. Into what? Obama said, if Iran will do this, we will end the sanctions. Iran has complied with all of their obligations under the P5+1. The United States isn't. In fact, the United States is now out there saying we need more sanctions because they're testing ballistic missiles and they're testing defensive weapons, and we want to invade them someday down the road. And how dare they build a defensive military? Same thing that we're hearing about North Korea.
If you dare to reproach with Russia or to have a normal relation in a deal like the Iran deal, which was the best thing that Obama did by far, then you are going to be investigated and God forbid, maybe found criminally liable. That's how dictatorial their control is over the United States.
Well, the investigation will be used to smear the Obama legacy, not that it needs all that much assistance, but in the end, as president, Obama had the legal authority to make this deal and sign on to it. And so there can't be any criminal prosecution. Obama, in that one case, was within the letter of the law.
Well, what are they investigating for then, Mike? What they are investigating for is kind of what they accuse Trump of Russia of being on their payroll or caving into coercement or being an Iranian agent, or like they accuse Trump of being a Russian agent. Preposterously, but they did, and that's what they're doing here too.
That's right.
We won't be able to. Yeah.
It's not really an investigation. It's just another political smear job. And Israel is sending a message that if you do not do what we tell you, we will destroy your historical legacy. Because all presidents are obsessed about their historical legacy. We certainly saw that with Obama during the closing months of his last term in office, where he's out there trying to rewrite history from within the Oval Office, which is a futile effort in the age of the Internet. But that's basically what it is. If you did not make us happy, we will destroy you in the pages of the history book.
Michael, I would love to see all the sanctions that they have gone to so much trouble to make sure that we put onto Russia. I'm talking about the Jewish lobby. They put onto Russia, we put onto Iran, we put onto Syria. That all of those sanctions were redirected to Israel. That we put no fly zones over Israel. And I would like to see us drop arms and munitions to Gaza, and force open the blockade with our Navy. That's really what they deserve. They're proliferating the nuclear weapons. They're invading everybody. They're the ones interfering in our elections and controlling us. And
they don't even hide it. They don't even hide it. They don't even hide it. They've got AIPAC and all these other pro-Israel organizations that are shaping the American politics, but we're supposed to think that's okay. It's just only wrong when Russia does it. And they can't even prove that Russia actually did it.
And all the dual citizens, should be declared illegal aliens, and we should be doing to them exactly what Trump should be doing to the other illegal aliens and kicking them the hell out of the country.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't like the idea of dual citizens holding positions of power in the United States of America. I think America's government should be in the hands of the American people and not in the hands of dual citizens with divided loyalties, or, as we just saw out in California, illegal immigrants who are now on city commissions able to influence that city's policy toward illegals. It's real bread and circuses time here in the United States.
And Mike, the seat of all their power is the Federal Reserve and the media. That's the seat of all their power. We have people who are loyal to a different country, controlling our money supply and controlling what we hear and see in the media.
You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. We're living under puppet rule, and we should not be any more content with it than the people of Iraq or Afghanistan or of Libya or of Yemen, because it's not a pleasant thing to live under puppet rule that benefits a foreign government. Washington, D.C. is a Vichy government on behalf of a foreign power.
Man, there is really nothing left, Mike. This whole deep state is the Israeli lobby. It is the banks. It is the complicit media. It's the intelligence services that do what they're bid by the banks and the media. And
I'm not sure it's that clear cut. I think the intelligence agencies and even the Pentagon have gone a little bit rogue, because I went on back and I looked at that video where Wesley Clark blew the whistle on this plan to invade these 7 nations in 5 years, and he kept saying that this document came from the Pentagon. It didn't originate with the White House. This was the Pentagon saying, we're going to go ahead and invade these countries because we don't know what else to do, and the war on terror isn't going very well, and we want more money for more weapons and more goodies, so we're going to just go on out and create these wars.
A corollary of that, Mike, is that honestly, in the last 40 years of my life, and we're the exact same age, I can't remember really the State Department crafting foreign policy at all. It's all come out of the Pentagon. Our military is our foreign policy.
Unfortunately, you're right.
There's damn little that's not.
Yeah, we're a warmongering nation, and we have been for quite a long time. Certainly since the end of World War II, where the American leaders saw a chance to become ruler of the world, and they've been playing that game ever since. Anyway, Peter, we're going to let you go here. Get on back to the news. Thank you very much for the phone call. Apparently, over on the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, things are getting tense there. Apparently, Pakistan overran some border checkpoints, and in the process, 50 Afghani soldiers were killed. So it looks like we may even see a little bit of a skirmish up there. We really are a world that is hovering on the edge of global war. Everywhere there's going to be war. There's going to be no place you can go to where it is not going to touch you. over at the Washington Post, they're pushing for the overthrow of Hungary's anti-immigration Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Oh, he's terrible. He's against globalism. He believes in strong borders. We have a right to go on in and replace him with somebody who's on board with the New World Order global government here. Meanwhile, as part of your daily dose of fear-mongering, the TSA is now warning against truck ramming attacks by terrorists. And they're now saying that truck owners and truck rental agencies must be extra vigilant about just who they are renting their trucks to make sure it's not being set up for a terror attack. All right, let's see. We have Wes in Idaho. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
So very fast. Thank you, Michael. Trump declaring May Jewish Heritage Month, and what's he going to do after the 50th year, June 8th, 1967 USS Liberty attack? What do you think Trump's going to do on that one? Anything?
No, he's just going to pretend. Trump is a friend of Israel. His father was good friends with Benjamin Netanyahu, and again, you look at Jared Kushner. No, the White House will not acknowledge the wrong done to the crew of the USS Liberty. They're expendable in the name of good relations with Israel.
Disgusting. I was reading USS Liberty incident on Wikipedia and learned a little bit. One thing, McGonigal, when he was coming into the area of the Six-Day Wars, and he was being told to just sit 12, 13 miles off, he said, hey, I want a destroyer escort to help me. And he asked this of Vice Admiral Martin, and Martin turned him down. He said, no problem, you're so easy to recognize, no problem. And also that I guess one or two of the carriers, Saratoga and America, were just 300 miles away.
Yes.
That's not even 10 minutes in an F-4. They could have been there quick.
Well, they actually launched a rescue flight, and they were ordered to return to the carriers right from President Johnson's office. And apparently Johnson was quoted as saying that he would rather see the Liberty and its crew on the floor of the ocean all dead than embarrass our best friend in the Middle East. And frankly, the lack of a destroyer escort for what is essentially an unarmed ship going into a war zone almost seems like the USS Liberty was intentionally being set up to be destroyed. And while it was all going on, while Israel was trying to sink the ship, Israel was saying, oh, it's Egypt. Egypt is attacking your ship. And then, of course...
That's the point I want to make. I've listened to a lot of Phil Turney, but I've never heard that Captain McGonigal actually asked for a destroyer escort, which he most certainly, justifiably, 12 miles from an active war zone, he needed that.
Yes. He did. It was a reasonable request to make, and the Vice Admiral,
yes.
There's definitely an issue there in terms of him not getting that escort, given the situation. In hindsight, it looks like they were being set up, just like the poor people here in Pearl Harbor were set up on December 7th, 1971.
And worse is, we let them get away with it.
No, we didn't. We didn't. President Johnson and Admiral of the Navy John McCain let them get away with it.
That, unfortunately, I learned this a long time ago. The people get the government they deserve. If they don't stand up and, hang LBJ before nightfall would have been the proper thing to do. We don't stand up. We don't get involved. We don't care. Just not enough of us get out there and do the things we should do. I'm writing a 10-page letter right now to Trump and asking just what he's going to do on June 8th, 2017, when, you know, all the congressmen and LBJ have done all this to we the people. I mean, atrocious things. LBJ, not only that, I know you don't believe in reverse speech, but most certainly LBJ, when he was making the condolence speech to the people on 3 or 4 days after JFK's death, he actually said in reverse, we killed him. We bumped him off.
All right, Wes, okay, that was the shark. That was the shark, and we're at a commercial break anyway, so I'm going to have to let you go. Thank you very much, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and before we take any more phone calls, because they're waiting, interesting little story. The FBI has come on out and said there will be no charges against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn because they could not find any evidence that there was any kind of illicit content in the telephone conversations with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. So Trump was wrong, not to mention weak, to let Flynn go. And it is interesting that the FBI is coming out with this information today because in her testimony before the Senate panel, Sally Yates is saying she was warned that Flynn was a blackmail risk, that he was compromised by the Russians. And the FBI is saying, no, there wasn't anything there. Obama just wanted to bug his political opponents. And his flimsy excuse for doing so is falling apart. All right, real quick, Ramsey in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. I just want to ask you a question. I was talking to one of the RBN hosts yesterday, and he got really upset because I told him, show me the evidence, because he said that Russia hacked the DNC. Russia was involved in the American election, the British election, and the French election. So do you agree with that? Like, I'm just kind of confused.
Well, yeah, obviously, in an age where we know governments lie to their people, like Saddam's nuclear weapons, anytime the government makes a declaration like that, you have a right to say, where is your proof? Show me the actual raw data that proves your statement. And, of course, what we're getting down here is, oh, we can't do that. It would reveal methods and sources. You're just going to have to take our word for it. Well, no, as a matter of fact, we're not taking your word about anything anymore, not after the humiliating way we've been lied to so much for so long.
See, but the RBN host yesterday said that Russia hacked the DNC computers. Is that true?
No. The DNC was a leak, most likely by a gentleman named Seth Rich, who leaked out the documents because he realized what the DNC was doing with regard to Bernie Sanders was dishonorable at best, illegal at worst. And so, yeah, there was the leak, and that's where WikiLeaks got it. And then Seth Rich was assassinated. They claimed it was a robbery, but he still had his cell phone, his watch, and his wallet when the body was found. And this whole Russia demonization all came up right after Hillary Clinton lost the election. And she's still out there trying... I'm sorry?
She said, because I listen to people like you and other people at RBN, but that guy on Sunday, he comes once a week on Sunday, he keeps on saying things that are completely different from you and other people. And he also said Russia was involved in the French election yesterday.
Calm down. You're drinking too much coffee. RBN does not tell the hosts what to say, so obviously some of us have different opinions than the others do. We need to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're looking, a lot of investigations going on, but of people who really can't fight back. Jane Sanders, Bernie Sanders' wife, is under FBI investigation over bank fraud that occurred involving falsified documents while she was running the Burlington College. And so they're going after that. Now, interestingly enough, a Democratic senator, Richard Blumenthal, is saying a special prosecutor should be appointed to investigate Huma Abedin's handling of confidential material regarding the revelation that she was forwarding classified emails from within the State Department secure network to Anthony Weiner's laptop, ostensibly for eventual printing. This is a Title 18 violation. And just as he did with Hillary Clinton, James Comey excused Huma Abedin and said there's not going to be prosecution because they couldn't find evidence of criminal intent. But if you actually read Title 18, criminal intent is not required. The mere act of sending classified information from within secured storage to insecure areas, that is the crime. And it can be done carelessly, negligently, completely by accident. It is still a felony violation. And Comey should know that, or he probably does know it and hopes that you don't know it. But now we have this Democratic congressman saying it's time for a special prosecutor for Huma Abedin. So it looks like Huma Abedin is the designated scapegoat for the email server scandal. They're going to drop it all on her. Oh, had nothing to do with Hillary. Huma was her assistant. She was doing it all. Bad Huma Abedin. She's going away for a very, very long time, unless she dies in a small plane accident or gets really depressed in Fort Marcy Park. But it looks like she's going to be railroaded for this. The sacrificial lamb. I hear the train a-coming, rolling around the bend. Anyway, Paul Craig Roberts, and I think I mentioned this a little earlier in the show, American Democracy, a Dead Man Walking, and he's basically saying the lesson from the last two presidents is simply that we the people cannot change the nation's policies through elections, because the oligarchs control whoever is elected. Obama campaigned on ending the wars, shutting down Guantanamo, did not happen. Trump campaigned on getting out of this culture of interventions in other countries. We didn't get that. The oligarchs are in control, and just barely, because again, it looks like the federal government is really fragmenting. FBI's gone off on its own little thing. The CIA's gone rogue. The NSA's gone rogue. The Pentagon has been rogue for a long time. They're trying to maintain the illusion that there's a unified government that you voted for, but that's all it is. It is an illusion. Now, here's a very alarming story, and I think it displays the real attitude by government toward you, the American people. Apparently, Air Force Secretary Michael Wynne is out there saying that the best way to avoid criticism internationally in the use of weapons against other people is to first use them on American citizens. And that way they can say, well, look, we know they're not lethal because we used them on the American citizens. They're talking things about microwave, area denial weapons, the things that make your skin feel like it's burning. And so they're looking for situations to use it on you so that when they use them in other countries, they can say, look, we know they're safe. We used them on our own people all the time. Now then, article coming out of RINF.com, leaked drone footage. Oh, wait a minute. We still have a caller waiting. I'm sorry, George in Texas. Thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? First of all, I get for a reason why I called is don't forget about Hungary. Not only they won't go along with the globalism, but they got weapons of mass nutrition.
Okay.
So, and I would love to go dining there someday. But anyway, one of my law enforcement friends that sees me at work at night, he was very concerned because Antifa, they're banning the big city, and they're talking about threats of going out and disrupting Memorial Day events where veterans go out and have their ceremonies, and I'm concerned about that. Mike. And believe me, if Antifa does that, I hate to say it is going to make them look even worse than they do now in the public eye.
I would absolutely agree, especially when you realize that they're going up against combat veterans.
Also, too, a lot of them are frail. In Texas and other states, if you hit a person above a certain age, it is a felony, not a misdemeanor. It is a felony, Class 1, I think.
Okay.
So, no, I don't know exactly the law, but if a caller would confirm that. But but like I say, you're going up against combat veterans. So I say, go ahead, try to disrupt it. But you know, the thing is, it's like they're just getting loonier and loonier every time. This Antifa.
Well, we're still trying to figure out what it is they're trying to do. I know they're down there opposing. There's a movement to preserve the Confederate monuments down in the South, and people are trying to stand around and protect them, and Antifa are going in and attacking them as well. It's hard to see what their agenda is, but we do know they're being funded by George Soros. So this is another one of Soros' attempt. Apparently, Soros has decided that the U.S. is no longer useful as his military arm for the New World Order, so he's going to start breaking this country up.
Also, too, another thing about this threat, like I say, they're not going to be attacking the big cities. They're going to be going out to suburban areas. They're doing flash mobs at Walmarts or all big box stores, supermarkets. I mean, they're trying to spread terror wherever they go. And I don't really think, Mike, it's going to work. You know, if they try going out in suburban areas, because they're not like the big city people.
No, they're a lot more independent-minded, and they're going to be a lot more likely to actually be armed and willing to defend their property. And depending upon what state you are in, the laws regarding use of force to defend your property are very much in favor of the homeowner in many states. Not all. You need to check your local state laws on that issue.
Like I say, like his threat, they said it's credible, but from his police officer. But you know, the thing is more like he's just saying. Since I work for a big box store at night, it's like you know, he sits there and goes, because we just had a lesson plan on active shooters, you know, which I mean I've seen all the time. But what about if you got to deal with a flash mob that storms your place of business? How are you going to protect yourself, your customers, your property? What can we do? I mean, that's I think the next thing we're going to have to worry about.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Now, originally, a flash mob was a performance art piece where they would all of a sudden rush in, they'd sing something, they'd dance or go around. They wouldn't cause any damage, and then they would leave. But lately, the flash mob concept has turned to crime, like we saw up on the BART trains, where all of a sudden 40, 50 young people will just rush into a train, rob everybody, and then split and just vanish, and the police don't know how to deal with it at all. Anyway, listen, George, I'm going to let you go. We're falling behind on our news points. We're going to take one more phone call, and then we are going to close the lines for a little while until I get caught up on the talking points. So, Brendan in San Francisco, aloha, what's on your mind?
One thing was, Mike, I was wondering whatever happened to Dustin from New Jersey. It's been a while, but that's not why I called in. They did catch one of the guys that was involved in that BART train flash mob.
Good. Just
an update there. And I just wanted to call in and remind folks about the GoFundMe, Move Mike and Claire Back to mainland.
Brendan, as we traded in email, I'm actually very uncomfortable with this. Because I thought if it failed the funding goal, the money would go back to the people, and I haven't got a confirmation yet that is indeed what happened. Somebody else wrote on in and said, no, with the GoFundMe, if you fail the funding goal, you still get the money, and that feels a little underhanded to me. And I really have to say again publicly that I wish you had consulted with me before you did this. And yes, we need the money to move back to the mainland, but I'm hoping to find it through other means here. And we're asking almost too much of our listeners because we're asking them to donate to what really happened. We're asking them to donate to RBN, which really needs it right now, and to throw another beg on top of that. The timing is really not there. And Brendan, I think we ought to put this thing on hold. if not just shut it down, because, again, it was not done with my approval, and I'm very uncomfortable about this.
Right. Based on your email, I got that. Well, anyway, I'm glad I called in because we kind of clarified that. I think the video that I saw posted on YouTube addressed some of those concerns, but I'm with you, Mike. Either we should shut it down or try to figure out maybe there's a different platform. But I understand your concerns. Yeah. I'm glad I called in. And on that note, we'll let you go. Maybe some of the callers might have a take on it too. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and I appreciate the thought. I know that you meant well, but again, and this applies to everybody. Please do not take any funding, anything involving what really happened or the radio show without clearing it with us first, because we can get into real serious trouble, and I'd like to avoid that. There are a lot of people out there who would like to see us do a major, major stumble. All right, we're going to close the phone lines for a little while I get caught up on the news, and we're going to do our much delayed shout-out to our network affiliates who are rejoining our program right now. Now, getting on back to this story, this is out of RINF.com. Somebody has leaked drone footage from drones being used for training by the U.S. military, flying out over the coast of Florida, and these drones are using vacationers, fishing boats, jet skiers, as dummy targets, where they're flying up there thousands of feet, and they'll direct the camera down onto your boat and follow it along for a while. Now, obviously, there is no direct harm, but there's a certain lack of respect for privacy, because sometimes people out on boats away from shore, they get very informal in their clothing. I used to see that when I was doing a lot of rag setting down in Southern California. And they don't necessarily want to be spied on from above. And you need to remember, in the months before the tragedy of the accidental shoot-down of TWA 800, pilots were complaining that the Aegis system simulators in New Jersey and that whole area were painting their aircraft with targeting radars. And those radars are so powerful, it was actually causing onboard interference. And they kept complaining about it, and nothing was done. And then, of course, we had the tragedy with TWA 800, where it was accidentally shot down during a test of the Aegis CEC missile system. Now, Russia is out there with a new update on their surface-to-air defensive missile, the S-500. It's about to enter service if it has not already. And apparently the S-500 can engage up to 10 missiles simultaneously, 10 targets simultaneously, with a reaction speed of 3 to 4 seconds. That is an improvement over the S-400, which could track 6 simultaneous targets and had 9-second reaction times. So things are really improving over there. Very alarming article. And by the way, I want to preface this by saying yesterday on the cable box, Smithsonian Channel was running all these documentaries about nuclear disaster and the bombing of Hiroshima and nuclear testing. And I will give them credit in the one that talked about the establishment of the Nevada test site. They were very honest in saying that atomic testing by the U.S. government was moved from the South Pacific to Nevada primarily to save money and also to guard against foreign observers looking at what was being done, to do the secrecy. And they knew at the time it was going to expose surrounding areas to radiation, but their attitude is, well, it's not going to be that bad a problem. And of course, eventually it did turn out to be that bad a problem, mostly because they never knew how powerful those bombs were going to be. And I have a vivid memory from when I was a school child in New Hampshire. And there had been a nuclear test in Nevada, and we got to school and they said, we have to keep you in the hallways. You can't go into the classrooms. You certainly cannot go out into the playground for the entire day. And so we all sat in the hallways. We didn't have lessons. We just played games and sang songs and, you know, had a lot of fun. But I remember looking through one of the doorways into the classroom I should have been in, out through the windows to what was a gorgeous day, very sunny day, and just this weird feeling that there was something there that had really scared the teachers. And then by the end of the day, they said, the danger is past, you can go home, which I'm not sure it was that clear cut. But they knew it was going to be a problem. But it was an acceptable sacrifice in the pursuit of nuclear supremacy. And that's how government sees all of you. So, apparently, over at the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, Hans Christensen, who's director of the Nuclear Information Project of the Federation of American Scientists, is basically saying that this recent program of what was a warhead life extension program, which is allowed under the various nuclear treaties, was actually a cover in that the U.S. military has vastly increased the yield of its warheads. This is a violation of arms limitations, nuclear arms limitations talks. And I'm wondering where the IAEA is in all of this, because they're supposed to keep an eye on it. But apparently America's nuclear warheads now have higher yields than are officially listed. And that's not a pleasant thought. Now, a while back I said one of the most important things you can all be doing is send a message to the world that we, the American people, do not agree with or support this agenda of conquest, especially confrontation with Russia. And somebody actually went on out there and did it. They created a website on which people can post messages of friendship to the Russian people. This is not to Putin. This is not to the government. This is the American people to the Russian people, and I want to read you one of them. To the people of Russia, we residents of the United States wish you, our brothers and sisters in Russia, nothing but well. We oppose the hostility and militarism of our government. We favor disarmament and peaceful cooperation. We desire greater friendship and cultural exchange between us. You should not believe everything you hear from the American corporate media. It is not a true representation of Americans. While we do not control any major media outlets, we are numerous. We oppose wars, sanctions, threats, and insults. We send you greetings of solidarity, trust, love, and hope for collaboration on building a better world safe from the dangers of nuclear, military, and environmental destruction. I'm in a perfect agreement, except that I would expand this message to all of the people of the world now in the gun sights of the American warhawks. If we can do nothing else, we can shatter the illusion being put out by the U.S. government that the American people are wholly on board with all these invasions and wars. Because we are not. And it is time to be honest about it, and it is time to be vocal about it, as loud as we can. We do not support these wars. We know these nations being attacked are not a threat to us. They are merely resources that are being gobbled up by American corporations who consider invasion and conquest the low-cost alternative to actually negotiating a fair price. Because after all, it's not their money and their children spent on the war, it is yours. Now, speaking of pulling the plug, Sputnik is now being denied press credentials for Capitol Hill because of their ties to Moscow. They're starting to draw the lines in the media. Friendly media will be allowed in. Media that's connected to Russia is now being held outside. We don't want to hear what you have to say. We don't want to hear your questions. And it's just like in World War II where they resorted to jamming to block broadcasts from other countries. They're trying to bring down a media curtain around you so you will only see and hear what the government wants you to see and hear, and everything else will be shut off. More about that when we come back from these words from our sponsor. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here, and getting on back to this issue about the media, the corporate media and governments are trying to start to put the walls up. I understand Facebook is already canceling accounts over in Great Britain in advance of the general election, and I'm trading emails with somebody in Great Britain who says that access to my website has now been cut off as well. Story that came out of InfoWars where apparently there is an attempt to get Alex Jones off the on-air broadcasters. The entire independent media is under attacks right now, which Again, if you remember what I said at the beginning of the show, RBN is in the middle of their annual May fundraising drive, and this time it is really, really needed. And as I was telling Brendan in San Francisco, it's very rough to be asking for donations to whatreallyhappened.com and then ask for donations for RBN who really need it, and then have this other thing as well. And I think we're just going to shut that down, and I appreciate the few people who did donate to that, and we'll put that money to good use. But there's a limit to how much we can ask, and right now the focus has to be on RBN with whatreallyhappened.com right behind it, because we are under attack. It is a war, and unfortunately the bad guys have got all the money, which unfortunately in this world it always seems that the bad guys do wind up with all the money and the power. I'll have another comment about that further in the show. Now, not everything is doom and gloom, because for those of you on BAM User TV, I received this in the mail today. And what it is a Donald Trump ring. It's got his scowling face on there. And it was a gift from a company called BigJoesBikerRings.com, who bill themselves as the official maker of Trailer Park Boys jewelry. And I went on over to their website and looked at some of the stuff, and it's really kind of a lot of fun. And they have the Trump rings in stainless steel, bronze, and sterling silver. So thank you very much for the ring. I actually can't wear it while I'm working because it slams into buttons on the mouse and sends me into very strange things. But I do appreciate that. And I imagine at some point, even though I don't agree with Trump and I'm very disappointed with him, I will probably forward it along to his eventual presidential library. If you remember, during Obama's second campaign for second term, when he was up against Mitt Romney, and somebody sent me these little puppets that you would put on, and there were levers inside that you would push where they had boxing gloves in each other. And I packed those up and sent them for Obama's presidential library. And it was the only time I got a nice email, not an email, regular mail. I actually got a note of thank you from the White House for that. So they do appreciate a good, well-thought-out gift. And so that's where this is going to go. Now, let's talk about the economy, because indications are really bad. When things started to fall apart in Venezuela, I said you need to pay attention to what is happening to that country, because eventually it's going to come north and hit us. And now it has moved north, because we're looking at the after effects of Puerto Rico being forced into a massive, massive bankruptcy. And we posted this article from the New York Times about how Puerto Ricans face sacrifice everywhere on an insolvent island. That's not an accurate description. It's not a sacrifice. They're being pillaged and plundered. And they're talking about all these people whose pensions are being cut. Businesses are just winding down because there's no money in circulation at the consumer level. But as long as the bankers are happy, that's just fine with everybody, including apparently the New York Times here. Greece is turning against the European Union. And as you know, the EU is demanding more austerity for yet another bailout from Brussels. And each new bailout demands more money from the people, more austerity, forcing the sale of Greek national assets and treasures. They're plundering the place. And the people of Greece want out. And I'm not too surprised about that. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, we're still talking about the economic news. The central banks have been injecting trillions of dollars, or whatever their currency happens to be, just made up out of thin air, into the markets to prop it up. And it's not enough. You can't just prop up the stock market and think that represents a working economy. Retail is in serious trouble. That problem's not going away. Stores are closing by the thousands. Sales are plunging because ordinary people like you and I have zero money at all. Now, the retailers are blaming the online sales, but online sales only account for 8% of all retail sales, and the online sales, they're not doing well either. They're in decline. Now, the San Francisco Federal Reserve says the economy is at full employment. Boy, is that a whopper. They're saying there's no reason that the Fed cannot raise rates next month. Now, first of all, it is a lie to say that we have full employment. We have more than 90 million legal American citizens willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs for months, if not years. But they're simply put into another category so the government can say we only have 4.4% unemployment, which is the latest lie they put on out. And the Fed is saying, see, we're fully employed. The economy is in good shape. We can raise the rates now. Guarantee Bank has failed. 107 branches are closing nationwide. They've gone bust. I don't recall seeing that one in the corporate media. And apparently, validating the theory that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome, the Federal Reserve is now confirming that on the next economic crisis, they're planning a massive stimulus. Just more paper money out of thin air. And we're going to wind up where Zimbabwe was, carrying paper notes that say $100 trillion on them. So the problem is the debt. And we have debt because the banking system we have, private central banking, survives on debt. That's what it does. It is designed to create more debt than money with which to pay the debt, so that that imposed sense of debt obligation can be used to control you and your government, your nation. Private central banking is not about economics, it's about enslavement. Commercial real estate loan delinquencies are on the rise again, and this is tied into the decline in retail. I have to admire the courage of people who will go on out there and try and open a store at the local mall. We've got a new one down at the bottom of the hill. I'm blanking on the name of it. I think it's called Bookends. And it's full of all kinds of memorabilia from Harry Potter and all that cool stuff. And I love looking at it. I can't buy any of it. But I admire their courage in it's called Lunchbox. That's what it's called. But I admire their courage in trying. Now, apparently, as retail declines, as the need to deliver things declines, the need for trucks are declining as well, and this has led Ford to shut down or start laying off at their medium-duty truck plant. See, it's all hooked together. There's a cascade. It's not just one sector of the economy that goes into trouble. Everything connected with it gets dragged down as well. When an automobile manufacturer shuts down an automotive assembly plant, all of the other small companies supplying parts to that plant lose that business, and some of them shut down. And those people are all let go, along with the auto workers. Bernie Sanders has come on out with an observation that these days the American dream exists in other countries, but not here. And he's absolutely right. And of course, governments everywhere, on every turn, when they get into trouble, what do? Find another way to do a tax. In California, there must be something in the water out there. California now is toying with the idea of taxing space flights per mile they travel. Now, it's one thing to say we're going to tax automobiles for every mile they drive because they're driving on state-constructed, hopefully maintained roads. But in terms of space flights, it's just up in the sky, in the air. There is no government-supported infrastructure up there. But apparently California wants to collect taxes from space transportation companies based on this very weird formula of how frequently a company launches spacecraft out of the state, and more absurdly, how far a commercial spacecraft travels from California soil. They want to tax space travel per mile, and they have laid claim that 62 miles above California now belongs to the state of California. And anything that passes through it is subject to a tax or tariff or fee. Now, I think the 62-mile limit is where, above that, there's an international treaty saying nobody has sovereign jurisdiction. Otherwise, you would have this impossible idea of countries saying you're not allowed to send your satellites over my country without paying a huge fee, which would be unmanageable. But California is planning to say all of the sky up to 62 miles in altitude above California belongs to the state of California. Don't you dare use our sky without paying a tax for it. Don't you dare collect rain that falls from our sky. It's getting a little bit la-la land out there in la-la land. Now, Macron's election victory, which he's describing as a victory for the world, he's not being pretentious at all, is he? It sparked a $300 million panic dump in gold futures. Maybe, maybe not. But it's going to depress gold prices, even though demand for physical gold bars and coins is up 9% in the first quarter. And the only way they can keep gold prices from going up is they blend the contract prices and the physical prices, and that is the London Daily Fix. And they use that paper trade, they manipulate the paper trade to keep the price of the physical metal as low as they possibly can. Okay. Bureau of Labor Statistics is still out there with their 4.4 unemployment, and nobody's believing it. Not when you have more than 90 million Americans who haven't been able to find work for months or years. Now, Spain's government is trying to unwind or rewind a property bubble they are now in. And as always, it amounts to a taxpayer giveaway that benefits banks, real estate agencies, construction companies, PE firms, and landlords. And we know Spain certainly qualifies as a fascist government, going all the way back to Francisco Franco. He was openly fascistic. But even without that label, history has always shown that ultimately the poor are made to pay for the crimes, corruptions, and stupid, dumb mistakes of the rulers. And it's happening again. Now, interestingly enough, over in Korea, there's been a development. A Chinese state-owned company has a joint venture with a North Korean company. And basically, China is not going along with the U.S. sanctions against North Korea. And the U.S. is trying to apply pressure. But we've seen this pattern repeated before. All U.S. sanctions do is cut off the targeted countries from doing business with the United States and its allies, which means economic losses for the U.S. and its allies, and we can't afford that. And it drives the targeted countries into the Russian and Chinese spheres of economic activity. The sanctions are not making the economy better, they're making it worse. Sanctions are what we do to countries that won't do what we tell them to do. Well, they're certainly not going to do what the U.S. tells them to do when they're being buddy-buddy with Russia and China. Now, apparently, while George Soros was in Rome recently, amid this whole migrant transport scandal, he arranged to have a secret meeting with the Italian Prime Minister. And this problem of African migrants has become a case of national importance for the people of Italy, and it's now under investigation from the prosecutor of Catania, who recently testified to the Defense Committee of the Italian Senate and will meet soon with the Superior Council of the Magistrate. And so there have been harsh criticisms of the activities of the George Soros NGOs, and they're starting to make noises like Russia and Hungary saying we need to kick them out. But apparently, George Soros believes he has an ally with the Italian Prime Minister, and had this little meeting to try and reverse it. Now, over in Hungary, which has already moved to kick out the Soros NGOs, Hungary is now demanding the European Union Vice President Franz Timmermans resign after he branded any criticism of George Soros' activities regarding refugee migration as anti-Semitism. You know when they've run out of arguments, that's their fallback position. Immigration is harming Europe. Oh, you're just being an anti-Semite now. These aren't even Jewish people. They're Africans and Syrians. Well, you're still being an anti-Semite if you oppose George Soros. And here is where it gets really weird, and if you are living in Europe, you want to pay attention to this one. This is out of prisonplanet.com, and I got confirmation from a couple of other sources as well. Some of the member states of the European Union are planning to decriminalize rape by the migrants because rape is their culture. This is a movement that is building in France, Sweden, Germany, and other of the nations. And apparently, we've already seen in the European media, rapes by migrants are downplayed as cultural misunderstandings, and the victims don't need justice. Basically, it's already de facto that if you're a migrant and you commit rape in Europe, you're probably going to get away with it. Recently, there was a German judge acquitted a Turkish drug dealer of rape, despite believing every word of the 23-year-old victim's accusation. Because according to the judge, what the victim had experienced as rape, which meant having her head shoved between two bedposts after she said no, is culturally considered just wild sex in Turkey. There's your globalism for you. The German judges are no longer enforcing the German law. They're opening the door to this cultural meltdown, where we all are driven down to the lowest common denominator of behavior. I would certainly hope that young women in Germany start carrying guns or at least pepper spray or knives and start to fight back. But when you have a government that is so on board with globalism that they're going to allow your young women to be raped and for the rapists to get away with it, you have got a serious problem in your country, and it is your country. And you shouldn't allow them to take it away and turn it into some foreign country where rape is an accepted part of life, because that's exactly what they're trying to do. And you should be outraged. Now, up in Sacramento, their taxpayers are now being soaked to fund the illegal immigrants. Not just supporting them and taking care of them, but for legal defense. The city of Sacramento is taking Sacramento tax revenues to hire lawyers to help the illegal immigrants avoid deportation. Amazing. Now, I want to get on to Stephen Fry. Stephen Fry, very funny man. He's done a lot of movies. Was in some of the Lord of the Rings films, Sherlock Holmes, Game of Shadows. He's been talk show all over Europe. He's had his own shows, and he's a very intelligent gentleman. And apparently, a while back, while being interviewed on TV in Ireland, Stephen Fry asked a question. Why should I respect a mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world so full of injustice and pain? And now he is being investigated by the Irish police for blasphemy. I didn't even realize that was still a crime in Ireland. But it is a fair question. For those of you who believe in the gods, why are the gods always giving all the wealth and power to people who then do such evil with it? And that's always one of the questions that you ask the clergy, and they always sort of shuffle their feet and get embarrassed about that, almost as bad as when you ask why the altar boy is walking so funny, is if you represent an all-powerful God who shapes the universe, why is there so much evil in the world? And there certainly is a lot in the evil in the world right now. How do you explain it? They'll come back and say, well, it's a mystery. We don't know. But I'm sure God has a real good reason for it. This is a very alarming story. This is coming out of Zero Hedge. Apparently, there was a court case in New York where Judge Royal Ferguson, who was judging a trial on Jeff Barron over what turned out ultimately to be fabricated charges, basically said that the Constitution does not exist in his courtroom, and said basically his authority was backed up by the military, and literally said, I can sentence you to death if you don't do what I tell you. And that, I think, tells you what's really going on within the justice system. If you get hauled into court, do not expect fair play, fair treatment, your constitutional protections. The courts are now being declared a constitution-free zone. Apparently in Arlington, Texas, there was a sports bar when a man carrying a concealed firearm shot a gunman. The gunman walked on in, apparently shouting incoherently, and started shooting at the patrons. And so this concealed carry gentleman by the name of James Jones drew his gun and fatally shot Perez. And they still don't know what was going on. To me, it sounds like more cases of prescription antidepressants. We'll be back after this commercial break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And let me just finish this off because I'm dealing with all of the emails. Some people in Britain are now telling me that, yes, my website is visible, so it might be just... let me finish this one thing real quick. There we go. And let's see, we're under hack attack on our server here, so it just keeps on going. Now then, getting on back to current events here. Amazingly enough, Big Lake High School has a trap team. And by trap, I mean going on out with shotguns and shooting clay pigeons. And it is a recognized, authorized school activity. And they consider it a sport, which is a good thing. But in putting together the yearbook, the school district said you cannot have a picture of the trap shooting team, and they have gone out and competed, because they're holding guns. Guns are evil. Guns are bad. Now, as I've mentioned many times before, when I was a kid in grade school, everybody over 12 had a gun. And we'd bring them to school, and we'd leave them in the cloakroom. Because on our way home, walking home from school, yes, we actually walked, chased the critters out of the garden. And the anti-gun hysterics are out there now. They don't want anybody even seeing what a gun looks like. And so they put pressure on the school district to deny this sports team their place in the yearbook. And it kicked up a huge public outcry among the parents, and the decision was reversed, and they're going to get their page in the yearbook as they deserve to do, because they're not doing anything illegal with the guns. I think the problem is the gun grabbers are saying they don't want to see where guns actually have some kind of a purpose other than mayhem and murder. Because anything that reinforces the idea of shooting as a sport, of shooting as a recreation, undermines their call for a ban on all guns. Now, schools, unfortunately, are becoming very rigid enforcers of the new political correctness status quo. Article out of Investment Watch blog saying that our young people are losing their freedom of expression and even the education itself as politics takes over the public schools. Now, there's always been a little bit of political influence on the schools, but today it is just completely overblown. Common Core is teaching a version of the Bill of Rights that is woefully inaccurate, including that Second Amendment. And political correctness is just conditioning, brainwashing our children not to speak their mind, and eventually not even to allow bad thoughts into their mind. We really are on the verge of a real 1984. And it is very scary. And while one of my big regrets in life is that I never was able to be a father, there's another part of me that says I wouldn't want to be raising a child to grow up in this world as it is today. We've got to take a break for station identification. Back with hour number 3 of our program after these few words.
Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show, third hour. The phone lines are still closed. I may open them a little later in the hour, but I want to get through some things. We're going to be talking about computers, and I'm going to start by saying that the person in Great Britain who said they couldn't see my site, they just emailed to say all of a sudden it started working again. And they're on the same ISP as the other person who said they could see the site. The problem may just be with the American networks. And I'm looking once again at the Spectrum outage map, and this is over at downdetector.com, which is a good resource to use to see if your ISP or cell phone provider is having some kind of a problem. And a lot of them really are. There's something going on with our domestic internet where there are all kinds of issues and problems. And Spectrum is still showing massive outages, lots of consumer complaints about it. And it may just be that problems in our own domestic internet are just not allowing things to get to certain places in a timely manner. Now, here's a story that you are going to love. Apparently, a doctoral graduate over at the University of Cincinnati wrote an artificial intelligence program called Alpha, specifically designed for air-to-air combat, and decided to test it out over at the Air Force Research Lab. And his first opponent, Alpha's first opponent, was retired United States Air Force Colonel Gene Lee, who was an experienced combat pilot and lost against Alpha. Alpha also defeated all of the other experimental air combat AIs available at the Air Force Research Lab and all the other volunteer combat pilots who tried to go up against it. And the contests were in a high-fidelity air combat simulator, and Alpha won every single engagement. And here's the thing that's going to make defense contractors very nervous. Alpha runs on a $35 Raspberry Pi computer. For those of you on BAM user, this is the unit. This little tiny $35 computer and this program written by one guy was able to defeat all of these expensive military industrial complex programs and computers in the combat simulator. And not only does it show the power of the Raspberry Pi, it shows the elegance of code written by a single individual rather than committee, and it underscores something I've been saying all along. The mere fact that the United States government is pouring huge, vast sums of money into the military does not guarantee that military will be effective. And again, we go back and we look at all the problems with the F-35, all the problems with the F-22, the Gerald R. Ford, the Littoral-class combat ships, the Zumwalt destroyer, and we see a history of extraordinarily costly boondoggle after extraordinarily costly boondoggle. So, cheers to that graduate student. I'm sure they're going to snap him up, give him a great job. And then they tell him, you can't use the Raspberry Pi, you've got to use this militarily approved mil-spec computer that costs $35 million each. Another story, this one's coming out of Gizmodo. Scientists are researching what happens with your Wi-Fi router. Now, as you know, your Wi-Fi is sitting there basically beaming low-power radio waves out and listening for something coming on back. But apparently, scientists have figured out a way to turn a Wi-Fi router in your home into this sort of radar camera. By listening to all the multipath reflections, they were literally able to create an image of the environment. And it wasn't sharp and it wasn't clear, but they were able to identify objects in the room, basically from the data from an unmodified commercial Wi-Fi router. So, boy, everything's spying on you. Now, the National Security Agency, contrary to its propaganda that it put out only a few weeks ago, collected and stored 151 million call records in 2016. And apparently they only had 42 warrants from the FISA court. They're just grabbing it all up. Now, Microsoft has come out with a new warning that hackers have hijacked the software updater with in-memory malware, and apparently they're using this so that the update, the Windows update, is loading malware instead of the authorized code. Now, little article over at ZDNet, are we heading toward a new encryption war? And what they're talking about here is not a war for ever more powerful encryption systems, but it is a war on private citizens' ability to use encryption and trying to find some legal way that your communications are in clear text at a point where it can be copied and spied on. And it's a violation of your Fourth Amendment right to privacy, and it's not going to have an effect on terrorism and crime because real criminals and real terrorists know that the off-the-shelf consumer-level computer equipment is all compromised. They're not going to use it. Or they're going to have their own encryption on an air-gapped machine and then send the messages across the Internet to be decrypted on another air-gapped machine. And we proved that this was possible with our challenge to the NSA. It's very easy to come up with a system of encryption the NSA can't break. Now, here's another very alarming article. This is out of the Daily Mail. Is your money safe? And they're saying a bank hack could affect millions of customers around the world by intercepting the two-step login verification codes. And this is called the SS7 service, and it helps mobile networks across the world route calls and texts by keeping calls connected as users speed along roads, switching from signal tower to signal tower. But apparently it can also be used by criminals to redirect the data, and hackers have now found a way to intercept the two-stage authentication codes sent out by banks. These are used to verify the identity of customers attempting to log into their accounts from remote locations or place some online transactions. And they're usually sent in the form of SMS messages, and by intercepting those codes through the SS7 service, criminals have free rein to empty your bank account at will. Now, my advice would be to not have your bank account set up to be modified by remote computer. The only thing we use our computerized access to the bank account is to check the balance. That's it. We do deposits in person with paper. We do withdrawals in person with paper. And transfers to and from our bank account are not allowed. And that seems to be the smart thing to do in this age of endless computer hacking. Now, apparently Uber is under criminal investigation for building software to avoid regulators. Apparently over at Uber, they wrote this program called Grayball, was first exposed in a March report in the New York Times, and apparently Uber used the software tool to hide cars from regulators who were attempting to conduct sting operations on drivers in areas the company was not yet licensed to operate, such as Portland, Oregon. And that is definitely tacky. It is not going to help Uber's public image. And it sounds like a really good idea, and I've seen the commercials for people. You can be an Uber driver. Not in a 17-year-old Honda, I can't. But there have been a lot of cases of Uber drivers being robbed by people who call for the drivers over the online app. There have even been cases of Uber drivers themselves victimizing riders for money or even worse. I have to be a little bit honest. In this argument between Uber and the licensed regulated taxi companies, I tend to come down on the side of the taxi companies, and mostly because we know the drivers in this area. We used to have one, was a neighbor just 2 doors down, and we met all his friends, sadly at his funeral, so we know them all. Oh, and I'm being hacked again. The children will have their play. Now then, speaking of children having play, WikiLeaks has dropped yet another CIA hacking tool. This one's called Archimedes, and apparently this one, if it gets into any machine inside your local area network, will give it access to every other machine inside the local area network, even if they're password protected. And of course, CIA is out there saying, well, WikiLeaks shouldn't have First Amendment protections to, expose these secrets and everything. Well, the CIA shouldn't be violating the Bill of Rights by using these tools on the American people. And that's really what it comes on down to. We have a criminal government that is very angry that the American people are catching on to just how criminal they are. Now, do you remember last week we were talking about this phishing attack on Google Docs, and it spread like wildfire, and Google has now disabled it. Now we're finding out that the bug that allowed this phishing attack to work was discovered by Google 5 years ago, and they just never got around to fixing it. And that. And apparently Google didn't even find it themselves. They actually paid a developer a bounty for finding the bug, how it worked. Now, we've all seen the movie The Internship about Google and what a fun place it is to be. But I suspect, like much of what comes out of Hollywood, it's not really portraying an accurate picture at all. I mean, watching that movie, I was ready to go on up and sign up to be a Google intern. Doubt if they'd take me at my age here. Now, there's a new law up in... somebody really hates my website this afternoon. New Montana law takes on warrantless electronic data collection. Governor Steve Bullock signed a bill to require police to get a warrant before they get any electronic communication information from service providers. And the new law will not only increase privacy protections in the state, it will also hinder one practical aspect of federal surveillance programs. We need to fight for our Fourth Amendment. We need to fight for the Bill of Rights. We need to constrain the government to go back to spying on and abusing real criminals and terrorists, not just treat the entire American people like we're all criminals by default, until we can prove we are loyal servants to the state. Apparently, Microsoft Edge has a new problem. This is being reported over in the Register in Great Britain. Apparently, their new browser, if it gets a string 1234, the output is 1144. And I don't know if that's a bad bitwise operation or what. But it's a little embarrassing when you let a product out without really checking it, that it's doing what you think it should be doing. Unfortunately, over the last several years, especially with software makers being indemnified against project liability, the software developers have increased their profitability by simply getting the software running, putting it out there, and waiting for ordinary end-user consumers to fulfill the role of quality control inspectors. You get on out there and you write back, this isn't working, okay, we'll add it to the list to fix. And so, in a way, you're being used as uncompensated workers for the software developers to make their product better. And as soon as it is working smoothly and perfectly, they'll be ready for an upgrade. Okay, we're going to open the phone lines if anybody wants to call, 800-313-9443. Article out of MarianWest.com, thoughts on the public discourse over climate change. And this is going back to MIT atmospheric science professor Richard Lindzen, who is saying that many of the claims regarding climate change are exaggerated and unnecessarily alarmist. Now, if you go and read my article on ClimateGate, down at the bottom are a whole bunch of quotes from the stars of the human-caused global warming movement. And many of them are out there saying, yeah, it's okay for us to exaggerate. We're trying to motivate people, not educate them. It's okay for us to lie to them. The more we lie, the more they will do what we tell them to do. Well, that's not working out so well. Meanwhile, over this last weekend, more winter weather hit Kansas. And they're already saying that the early wheat crop is just being devastated. And any more winter weather is going to kill off the rest. And here's where you need to understand. All the food crops, fruits, vegetables, wheat, and cattle that are being killed in this cold snap are going to drive food prices up on those items at your supermarket. So gosh darn that human-caused global warming. Apparently they had a little bit of wild weather in Southern California. They got snow on the San Diego mountains. And for people who are traveling up to Palomar to visit the observatory there, and that is a very fun trip if you're a science geek like me, they issued a snow chain alert for the roads up there. Now, over in the Midwest, they are having massive flooding. The Mississippi River is rising, and it is apparently 13 people have already been killed. 10 million people are under a flood warning to be ready to evacuate their homes. And weather experts are saying that several of these areas along the Mississippi are likely to see near-record crests as those near-record snowfalls melt. That's where this is all coming from. When you have record snow, you get record meltwaters. And the drainage systems are inadequate to that reality. Now, turning on over to vaccines, story out of Natural News. They're reporting that the University of Ghent, Belgium, released a paper in which it accidentally admitted that most flu shots are continuously out of date and therefore do not work. So what they're prescribing for you to take, especially for the seasonal flu, it may be out of date. It may be the shot for last year's flu and totally ineffective against this year's flu. Another story out of Need to Know. They're talking about the first ever peer-reviewed study comparing vaccinated and unvaccinated children and their total health. And they got a pool of unvaccinated children from homeschool children. The vaccinated children had a much higher rate of autism and ADHD, 470% higher than those who never received a vaccine. Vaccinated children were also more vulnerable to allergies and eczema. Remember, a while back I asked if eczema was a vaccine artifact. Now, the unvaccinated children did contract the mild childhood diseases more frequently, but the vaccinated counterparts suffered pneumonia and ear infections much more commonly. In other words, the vaccines are causing more harm than good. We're going to start taking phone calls here. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I apologize. I got in late, so I've got a couple of topics that you may have discussed. First, did you hear about Obama getting that Profiles in Courage Award?
Yeah, I did. It's more plaques to put on the wall so that people will say, oh, this is a man I should listen to and believe.
Right. I mean, shame on Caroline Kennedy, because I think her father is turning in his grave. You know, the 35th President of the United States, he wanted to strengthen global peace. He wanted to stabilize relations with the then Soviet Union. Then you have a guy like Obama who is attacking 7 countries, drone killing thousands of people, destabilizing relations with Russia, and he gets this award. Shame on Caroline Kennedy.
It takes a lot of courage to sit there in the Oval Office and send out other people's children and spend other people's money to cause mayhem in other countries. So, yes, he deserves that award, absolutely.
Absolutely. And then also, did you hear the comments from the Saudi, I don't know if he's the Saudi deputy crown prince or crown prince, the son of the king, Salman? He made a comment threatening Iran. I found that to be rather amusing. They can't even deal with these rebels in Yemen. They're going to take on Iran.
Yeah, I talked about that earlier in the show. Going to have to drop you, take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Apparently, a listener from Atlanta called into the show reporting AT&T is now blocking access to whatreallyhappened.com. So I can't say that I'm really surprised. It really is a war between the liars and the truth tellers right now, and unfortunately the liars have got all the money. We're going to take a phone call from Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, I heard you talk about the California wanting to tax spaceship travel by the mile. You see, Jerry Brown, back in the days when he used to hang with Linda Ronstadt, was a good little environmentalist. He used to talk frequently about the Earth being spaceship Earth.
Yes.
The Earth as a space station. See, so any rocket has to be taxed, just as you get charged for a boat slip or landing fees for an airplane. When you're going to send a spaceship out as a launch from the mothership, you know, if it's privatized, it has to pay fees for these services. So it's only natural.
Well, I would disagree with that. I mean, next California is going to require all rockets get a smog certification before they're allowed to fly. But in this case, the state of California is not providing any infrastructure. You know.
No, I know, but
okay, it's just
I'm
another.
talking about Jerry Brown's spaceship Earth mentality. That's
well, it's a romantic. It's a romantic idea, but Jerry Brown was never ruler of the entire Earth. And but this is just another cash grab. The governments are desperate. They're trying to find anything that they can tax without having the people rise up with flaming torches and pitchforks. And we're getting very dangerously close to that moment right now. But this idea of taxing space flight by the mile and saying we own the air over the state of California up to an altitude of 67 miles, it is so ridiculous on the face of it. I think most people are going to look at it and saying it's just another excuse to take money away from struggling businesses and struggling citizens as we head closer and closer to that final collapse.
Oh, I agree. But look who you're dealing with. And I think part of California's problem is it's had too many governors with the names of colors in their names. Jerry Brown, Gray Davis, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Schwartz is black. Maybe they ought to try a governor that doesn't have a color in his or her name. That might help. I know it might be a tie there to the California psychosis.
Well, maybe, but there's something definitely weird about California. And again, I used to live and work in Southern California, and I saw a lot of really bizarre stuff. And I thought that was just the California culture, for sure. And maybe it's something in the water, but whatever it was, it's just weird. It's a cash grab is all it is. Anyway, Glenn, going to let you go. So,
yeah. But, I was just say one more thing.
Yeah.
It's this absolute outrage that people such as Comey and the judge you spoke about before think it's okay to fail to enforce the law because of things such as his interpretation of intent or the judge's interpretation of culture. Culture doesn't matter. When when in Rome, do as the Romans do. If someone from Turkey is here in the U.S., he's still subject to the U.S. law. And we have literally scofflaw law enforcement people and judges. This is horrific treason.
Well, look at what's going on in Europe, where they're actually talking about rape by the migrants will be decriminalized because it's really just a cultural misunderstanding that what women in Europe call rape is just wild sex in Turkey, and therefore we shouldn't punish them for following their cultural norms, even though they're not in their culture anymore. That's how completely ridiculous this whole situation has become.
This will necessarily end in vigilantism, which will be characterized as terrorism and revolution, as you always said.
And racism against the migrants. That's what. Oh, they're just being racist to insist that they follow our rape laws. I mean, it really is ridiculous. All right. Well, listen, we're coming up on another commercial break here, so we're going to let you go here, and we're going to answer more phone calls after the commercial break. Meanwhile, very bizarre story out here. This is in Natural News. There may be another cause for the mental weirdness that we are seeing in our society besides the SSRIs. They're now talking about vaccine rage, that some of the materials that are used as adjuvants in vaccines, especially the heavy metals, can lead to bizarre, aberrant behavior. Certainly the mercury does, That's where Mad as a Hatter came from. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before I get back to these remaining phone calls, there's one more story I really do want to get out today. Now, if you ask if people who are harmed by vaccines can sue the vaccine manufacturers, the conventional wisdom is no. And it turns out not entirely. And apparently, Merck has this shingles vaccine. You've seen it being advertised all over the TV. If you had the chicken pox, you've got the shingles vaccine in you already, and 1 in 3 people get the vaccine, Zostavax. And apparently, people who are taking this shingles vaccine are getting all kinds of adverse reactions, including an immediate case of shingles. It's actually causing the condition it's supposed to prevent. One person literally went blind in one eye, partial paralysis, brain damage, and some people have died from this shot. And so people are lining up to sue Merck, and Merck is out there saying, well, you can't sue us. You have to go to the special vaccine court and plead for compensation for the government. This is all based on the 1986 Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. But there's a problem. It says right in the title, this is the Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. And the law shielding vaccine companies from civil liability for the mistakes they make only applies to childhood vaccines. And Zostavax is only for adults. They are not protected by that law. And there are class action lawsuits springing up all over the country. And I'm sure that Merck is already running to Congress saying, please, you've got to protect us. We meant well, really. And we wrote you big campaign checks last season. But we do need to restore product liability, not just to the medical industrial complex, but to computers and software, to everything. It looks like we might finally see some action. But again, in our current fascist economic dictatorship, I'm half expecting Congress to rush through a new emergency bill expanding the Childhood Vaccine Act to include adults. Call it the Merck Protection Act. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Greg in Washington State, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Oh, gosh, lots is on my mind. I want to talk about a weather-related event in our electrical grid. I mean, we had this incredible little storm here, 3:15 Thursday, while I was listening to you. Lost electricity and internet, phone, everything else. Got the electrical grid back up about 2 days later. Anyway, man, our electrical grid is incredibly fragile.
Yes.
It only takes a few days. By the way, can I give a shout-out to probably the greatest inventor in known human history, Nikola Tesla.
Yes.
A man who electrified the world. Anyway, boy, Mike, our electrical grid is really scary. You know, it's down for any length of time. I mean, society's going to collapse.
Well, that's why everybody ought to be prepared to weather a 2-day electrical blackout. When we had our big earthquake here a few years back, portions of Oahu didn't get their electricity back for 2.5 days. We were without power for about 18 hours total. And that is the reality all across the nation. This wartime economy has resulted in our critical domestic infrastructure being allowed to rot away through neglect. And we're seeing that in the electrical grid. We're seeing it in the quality of our internet service. We see it in the cracked and decayed conditions of our roadways and rail systems. The country's being allowed to rot on the vine so that all the money can be spent on this program of conquest around the rest of the world. And when they get into this war and lose it, we're going to be left with a country that is as devastated by decay as any other nation that was bombed. And that is just a very unpleasant thing we all have to be ready for. Oh, and by the way, regarding Nikola Tesla, I was absolutely delighted when the Supreme Court basically recognized that Tesla is the inventor of radio and Marconi was basically stealing his patent.
Yes. Yeah, Mike, I agree with you. I mean, Tesla, I I mean, what an incredible guy he was. A little eccentric, but, you know, when I hear that your program...
Yeah, I was going to say, great genius is to great madness near allied, and thin lines, their bounds divide. That was La Rochefoucauld, I think, said that. And if you didn't,
yes,
I'll take credit for it.
Sounds good. There aren't any saints on my heroes list. You know, just people who've accomplished things. You know, I'm really, really disheartened to hear about your program being, you know, cut off, stopped. I mean, oh, God, I mean, it just smacks of Big Brother, you know, this dystopian world where...
Maybe, but we can't just rule out it's the crumbling infrastructure. Unfortunately, I'm on Spectrum out here, and Spectrum is still dealing with all these major problems. If you go to downdetector.com and check out your own ISP, they're all having problems. There's something going on with the Internet that they're not able to get it up and running efficiently. It may simply be oversubscribed, and they're not spending the money to upgrade and then expand the service, and so it may just be overloaded. But we're not exactly sure. Like I said, over in Great Britain, that person wrote back and said, all of a sudden my site started coming through. That, to me, suggests that it's an infrastructure issue. We know that the DNS that is used by Spectrum and others actually has problems and flaws with it, and it's often better to go to OpenDNS or FreeDNS or even Google DNS because that access time to the DNS server is a big part of the load time for your browser as a whole. And I changed my DNS servers over the weekend to get away from Spectrum, and my browsing speed went up noticeably.
You know, you mentioned Wi-Fi routers.
Yes.
I asked Comcast to disconnect my Wi-Fi just because of I'm sitting here next to it. You know, just figured less radiation. But how do I know they really disconnected it?
Well, in most computer widget shops, they sell these little charms or something that will actually light up when they're next to a Wi-Fi spot. And the intent of them is for you to be able to actually locate a Wi-Fi hotspot that is not broadcasting its identity to try and get into it. But basically, that's what can happen. You know what I'll do? I mean, some radio emitters can cause some LEDs and even small fluorescent bulbs to illuminate, the way a Tesla coil would at a much higher frequency. And so tonight I'll bring up one of the little gizmos I have with my Tesla coil and see if it lights up next to the antenna. And if it does, I'll share that tomorrow. Hey, if you're really concerned about whether your Wi-Fi is off or not. But generally, again, yeah, we don't know what the effects of long-term exposure to Wi-Fi radiation is. We're always being told this stuff is safe, and then we find out down the road, no, it really wasn't. We were told that the shoe store X-ray machines were safe until all the shoe store salesmen started getting cancer. We were told that the X-ray machines at the airports were safe until all of a sudden the TSA workers started getting cancer. Oh, let's feel bad for the TSA workers. And the same thing is true of these ultra-high-frequency radio waves because they don't have enough energy to cause damage to a molecule, but apparently there's been a recently discovered phenomenon, and I think this was discovered over at Johns Hopkins, called molecular resonance, where under continuous excitation by a radio beam, the molecules can start to vibrate and resonate more and more until they can actually break from the physical stress like the Gallipoli-Gertie Bridge did over at the Tacoma Narrows, where all it took was a little wind to get this bridge shaking and start to come apart. So, again, they're discovering that this radiation, you know, we could see a correlation between on-air broadcast radio and television and cancer. I remember when I was down in Alaska, I'm sorry, in Australia, they both begin with A, near where I was staying, they were actually tearing down a radio tower. And I went to say, you know, has it gone out of business? He says, no, Australia had just passed a law that AM and FM radio transmitters could no longer be located in residential areas because of the health problems. And there was a new law saying they all had to be located out in the outback and broadcasting into the residential areas. So some governments are aware that there is an issue there.
Wow. Hey, let me just mention one more thing.
Yeah.
One of the great things I like about your program, besides your ideas and different points of view that I may not have considered, are some of your callers. I mean, you do get some interesting callers with interesting points of view. You know, that helps, I think, makes your show great. Anyway, with that said, I'll let you go. Have a great day, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And speaking of interesting callers, we're going to go to Errol in the Netherlands. Errol, thank you for waiting so patiently. I know it's an expensive call for you. What's on your mind?
Hey, thank you for taking my call. Aloha nui nui.
Aloha nui nui.
Thank you very much for taking my call. I just want to say very quick, because we are almost at the end of the show, I know it. And here's my, I got a new, I wrote something down, and here it goes. When you want to know your owners, follow the paper rabbit.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand the concept.
The paper rabbit is the paper trail.
Okay.
Paper money.
Yes.
You understand?
Now I'm beginning to get it. Yes.
Yeah. Tonight I'm going to watch your special FX. I'm going to watch the movie Conan the Barbarian from 1982.
Okay. Well, to be accurate, I didn't work on the visual effects. I just did a little bit of work on the swords, and it's uncredited.
Of course.
Of course. But it is a fun movie. It is a fun movie, and James Earl Jones is just so amazing in that movie. The remake they did of it just couldn't hold up. It just couldn't hold up.
But the 1982 is the best.
Okay. I'll take your word for it. I still like the original, but then I'm prejudiced.
Hey, talk to you later.
All right, thank you very much.
Nui nui.
Aloha nui nui and mahalo. We're going to switch over to Joy in New Jersey. Joey, what's on your mind?
Mike, I just wanted to ask you a very simple question on the health care. Why don't we have the same insurance that the senators and the congressmen have? I'll hang up and listen to you.
Well, the obvious answer is Congress is always according itself special privileges and limits. Out in California, they just passed a draconian gun ban and exempted the legislature from it. We see that happening more and more, where it's one set of rules and costs and privileges for us, and another completely different for the ruling class. Remember that story we did about a week ago, where during the H1N1 breakout, Angela Merkel and her German leadership got the vaccine without the adjuvants in it, and all the German people were forced to take the vaccine with the adjuvants in it. So that right there tells you the adjuvants are not good things, but for some reason they want them shoved into our body. Now, as far as the insurance and programs, I think under under Obamacare, Congress exempted itself from the requirements as employers of their own staff, and I think there was an attempt to do the same thing with Trump Care. But yeah, the Congress is always going to vote itself special biases and exemptions, because they know this stuff is inconvenient, and it's a pain, and they don't want to have to deal with that. All right, let's see. Back to the phones here. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Tom, are you there?
Yeah, good day. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. I hear you.
Okay, Michael. Yeah, you were talking a few minutes ago about how great Tesla was, and he was a super fantastic inventor. Probably was the best. But then we have a guy here in South Florida who was a wonderful inventor too. But can you imagine Big Brother back in the 30s? There had the Big Brother with cameras like now. That guy would have never been able to build a coral castle. His name was Scallion.
Oh, yes, I know about him.
With 10-ton boulders.
Yes.
Well, I went down on his place the other day, Michael, and you really are fascinated by what this guy had accomplished. Can you imagine? It's really weird. The timeline is Tesla and this guy Scallion were around at the same exact time. They were living in the same time period. And can you imagine if they were to put those two men together in a room, what the inventions would have been, what the world would have been if they could have got those two guys together. But in the meantime, they're having wars and all this insanity. And in the meantime, you have these two guys that are doing stuff that's astronomical. It's mind-blowing. And then you got this guy Hawkins now saying you better get off Earth in 100 years or the whole world's going to blow up. I mean, it's unbelievable. But
well, Hawkins is now...
Back to Michael.
Okay, Hawkins is now... he's basically playing for media attention, and he's saying a bunch of things that are not supported by any actual research. And he was out there the other day saying that we should be careful what radio we allow into space because it might invite invasion, and that gets him a lot of headlines. But again, as I said, any civilization that has evolved to the technology of being able to travel between the stars, their culture is going to evolve alongside of it. And I'm sure there's intelligent life out there. What of possible interest are they going to see on this planet? We're still living in a stage of perpetual tribal warfare, and we're shooting at anything we don't understand. For all we know, there's a big sign outside the solar system saying, quarantine zone, these life forms are nuts.
Well, Michael, did you hear the news today that happened in Cape Canaveral?
We're not talking about...
They had a big They had a sonic boom. The plane just came out. There was a secret plane that I guess they just landed today here in Cape Canaveral.
Oh, yeah.
Sonic boom. A lot of people freaked out.
Yeah, the X-37B. Yeah, I remember when we lived in Southern California, every time the shuttle had to come into Edwards, we'd get a sonic boom there in North Hollywood, and some of them were really loud. And I also remember living in Southern California, we used to get what were called the Aurora quakes from whatever top secret thing that was. Anyway, we're going to have to let you go. Got to take a commercial break.
Michael.
No, we got to go. I have too many phone calls. I'm not even going to get to all of them before the end of the show. So we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to try and fit in these last 3 phone calls in this last segment. Rick in Nevada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Rick in Nevada here. Is that me?
That's you. I think it ought to be you. You're wearing his underwear.
My pops passed away a week ago, and he was in the hospital recovering from bowel surgery. And the smiling pharmacy girl person comes in and says, "We want to give you a pneumonia vaccine." I said, "I'm against it." And the pop says, "Oh, I want it," because he was of the generation that you accepted everything that the government approved. And then he doubled down and he said, "I want a flu vaccine too." And I just shook my head, put my face in my hands. Anyway, he got the vaccines, and I don't harbor any illusions that a 94-year-old man has great chances of surviving a bowel surgery when he already has congestive heart failure and a half a dozen other conditions. But I stand by my being against those damn vaccines.
Well, my condolences over the loss of your father, and...
Thank you. Pneumonia was what killed him.
Okay. Oh, well, I guess the vaccine didn't work very well.
Didn't work at all. In fact, I think it helped bring it on.
It does happen from time to time. So, anyway, well, thank you for the call. We're going to switch over to Bob in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. What is on your mind?
Good evening, Michael.
Good evening.
Over the past day and a half, the whole media has been about the healthcare thing, and there's a lot of folks screaming that it's a right. Well, if that is so, the Second Amendment also gives us a right to bear arms. But I got to tell you, nobody's buying me a gun, pal.
Well, as a matter of fact, if you read the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, there's nothing in there about you having a right to government-sponsored health care. People use the word right with reckless abandon these days, like the Kurds saying they have a right to access to the Mediterranean. And they use it because it's a very powerful persuader, but it doesn't actually exist. The rights that we have are those enumerated in the Bill of Rights, and there's nothing in there that says you have a right to have other people pay for your medical care, especially
Correct.
abortions.
And that's what I'm getting at, Michael, is I have a right to own a firearm, but that doesn't mean that anybody else has to buy me a gun.
Very good analogy. Very, very good analogy. That makes a lot of sense. All right. Terry in Juarez, let's see if we can get you in before the closing music. What's on your mind?
Hi, I just wanted to kind of reiterate what that guy said a little bit earlier about power outage. He really was talking about a national power outage, though he didn't say it that way. He came to grips with what that means. And here in Juarez, Mexico, we went without water for 3 days because of a contamination problem. And I'm here to tell you that you will go out of your mind after only about 6 hours without water.
Yeah, it's very important.
Water.
Yeah, we had a problem here in our part of Oahu. We were without running water for 2 days, but fortunately we had our storable water to get us through. There's the music. I'm sorry, Terry, I got to let you go. It's time for us to sign off. I got to go to Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Hopefully we'll have some of these tech issues sorted out from my end and the RBN's end, and we'll have a much more professionally sounding program. So until tomorrow, aloha, America.
Yeah.